So in GIS, we can select by attribute by looking in the attribute table, or we can also select by location based on how the various polygons or points or lines are related to each other spatially on a map. When we talk about these things, we're generally talking about three kind of primary categories. There's adjacency, proximity, and containment. So let's look at each of these. Adjacency just means that something touches something else. So if we were looking at Missouri here and we wanted to select all of the states that were adjacent to Missouri, we would select the states in gray on this side of the map here. So Missouri is not actually adjacent to itself, it is Missouri, so that would not count, but we would select all of these other states in gray here. When we're looking at adjacency, one thing we have to keep in mind is in this case, all of the other states are adjacent because they're along a line, an edge of the boundary of Missouri here. But that's not always the case. Sometimes polygons just touch at one point. One example here would be if we were trying to find all the states adjacent to Arizona, it would matter whether we want to have them adjacent along a line, such as shown with California here, Nevada here, and so forth, or if they could also be adjacent at just one point, like the four corners here. If it's not okay for them to be adjacent at just one point, if they need to be adjacent along a line that they share, then this would be the selection that we would get for Arizona. But if we selected all states that were adjacent to Arizona, included ones that only touched at one point, also called a node, then we would select Colorado as well. For proximity, it's just how close to an area we are. So we don't actually have to be within the area, because if we were selecting within the area, we would just select these dots shown within the area, but we could select within a certain distance of that area. And then as we can see with this dashed red line here, we're also selecting all of these wells here that are within a certain distance of this area or within the area itself. So sometimes it's important to know what's nearby, even if it's not right on the area that you're concerned with. That would be proximity or closeness. A third type thing is containment. And sometimes things don't have to be completely contained within an area in order for part of that area to be contained within it. So in this example here, we see all of the hazardous waste sites, all of the counties with hazardous waste sites in them. We don't know where the hazardous waste sites are in that county, but we know those counties have to deal with this issue. Overlaid on top of that is a watershed. And of course, watersheds would be very concerned with where hazardous waste sites are because they could potentially contaminate the surface water. So we're going to select all of the counties in this area, even if they're whether they're completely within the watershed or whether just a portion of the county is within the watershed. And once we do those, then we have all of these counties selected, and now out of that subset, we're only going to select the counties that have at least one hazardous waste site associated with them in that county, because that could still be a risk to the watershed and to the surface water. It may not be. For example, in this county here, if all the hazardous waste sites are outside of that little gray area there, then it might not be an issue. But this is kind of a conservative way of doing it. And now what we can see is all of these counties here are contained within the watershed and have hazardous waste sites on them. So this containment means at least part of these counties are within this watershed. And furthermore, the red color means that in addition to that, they have at least some hazmat sites associated with them. So in this example of containment, these are all of the states that are part of the Mississippi River watershed, including all of its tributaries. And once again, it does not mean that the entire state drains into that watershed. Some of the rivers up here in New York are draining into the Great Lakes and so forth. But it means that in some ways, these states, if they're concerned with with how clean the water is in the Mississippi River, would have to address that at a statewide level. So this is a good example of containment because, once again, if we broke it down to the county level, this would be much more specific. But as far as the states goes, there's obviously a lot of states that have concerns for the Mississippi River and its tributaries.